Hey, you're listening to the Tales of a Gearhead podcast. This is brought to you by Cornwell Tools. I'm your host, Stacey David. And Cornwell Tools are the choice of professionals, but not just professionals. Also, for everybody that wants to do any kind of quality work with quality tools, better check out Cornwell. All right, let's get to it. All right, I've got a really good question from Keith. And Keith is saying, hey, I grew up a car guy. I always loved messing with cars. He said, now I'm married, have a family, and I want to kind of introduce them to the car world. So his question is, what is a great family vehicle that they can all enjoy and they can kind of be introduced to the car culture? Great question. I'll tell you what, Keith, you're at a crossroads right now. If you choose wisely, you will have wonderful days ahead with family involvement. If you choose poorly, you'll be out working in the garage by yourself and people will hate your projects. I'm glad that you're asking this. Of course, personal preference comes into play on this, but one of the things that I try to always tell people is you want to try to find something that has the most involvement for everybody. In other words, it's not just about you. It's not just about what you like. You have to think broader than that if you truly want your family to be involved with it. When I look at everything that's out there, my first suggestion would be some sort of a Jeep or an SUV. Because you can go camping. There's a whole lifestyle that comes with a Jeep or an off-road style SUV. And I'm not talking about hardcore Jeeping yet. I'm just talking about overlanding, trail riding, that kind of thing. I mean, we just called it Jeeping back when I was growing up. Now, it's called overlanding, which if you haven't looked at the overlanding world, that's basically all these tents and these canoes and these things that you can pack on top of your Jeep or your SUV. You go to some trailhead somewhere. You can hike, you can camp overnight, you can just do those fun things that the whole family will really enjoy. And that way you can slowly get into it. And then as they realize, maybe you want to get on a trail and go a little more crazy with the Jeep, the family will understand that. And there is nothing like, I remember riding with my dad. When I was a kid, man, when he would lock that thing in four-wheel drive. Well, let me back up a little bit. Dad never locked the Jeep in four-wheel drive. It was always like, hey, boys, I'm stuck. Why don't you get out and lock in the hubs? And I was always like, Dad, you're supposed to lock your hubs in when you go off-road, not when you get stuck, because he was invariably buried in a mud hole. And my brother and I were out there trying to turn those hubs in. Man, it was always a mess. But Dad was the type of guy, he didn't want to tear anything up, didn't want to have to use it until he had to, which meant, we got stuck a lot. But it was fun. I mean, we were all enjoying that. And anytime, for me, I was a little more on the wild side as far as the off-roading part of it. Anytime we did some sort of trail or something that looked like a challenge or impossible and that kind of thing, it was just mesmerizing, and that's one of the reasons I really love Jeeps. I remember one time we went out, Dad was taking a shortcut. We had been out camping and he wanted to take a shortcut back to the house. And this was going to save us about 2 hours. But this shortcut went through the mountains instead of taking the interstate. And he had this old Jeepster Commando. So we're going down this trail, and it's just a regular kind of Jeep trail, pretty easy passage. But there had been some rain. So we get to this place, and all of these big lifted 4x4 trucks are stuck. There's this big mud hole that goes right between these trees, and there's this tree line. And this huge, deep mud hole, and all these trucks were getting stuck. And these were fully winched, big tired trucks, and they couldn't get through it. So we come rolling up, and Dad had this stock Jeep Commando. This was like a 69 Jeepster Commando. And with a little V6. And the guys, they took one look at that and said, you're never getting through that. That thing? Are you kidding? They're laughing. They're like, you're going to have to go all the way back around. And my dad was like, there is no way we are going to go back the way we came. Instead of saving 2 hours, it's going to take us 4 hours. So Dad looks around a little bit. He goes, boys, get in a Jeep. So we hop in, and I'm like, what in the world is about to happen? Dad's going to go through this mud hole. I was expecting, we're going to be submarining this thing. And Dad takes the Jeep, and he goes out through the trees, and he takes that little narrow Jeep around, got completely off the trail, and just bypassed the problem. And all those guys were standing there scratching their heads because their big wide trucks wouldn't do it. I never forgot that, because it was like, that's a person that understands their vehicle and used it to its best benefit. Now, it wasn't as exciting as jumping through a mud hole, but it got us home, and it was an adventure, and it was one of those things that was just fun. And if you want to get your family involved in something like that, man, take them out on something like that. There was another situation, and even just a lifted truck or a 4x4, there's a certain freedom that comes in that. For example, I was out one time when our girls were young, and we went to the local restaurant, and all the parking places were taken, and then there was this berm off to the side where, we just kind of went up this hill. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to make my own parking spot. And they were like, Daddy, can you do that? I said, sure. Locked the thing in four-wheel drive and just pulled up on the berm there. We went in and ate. And they just thought it was amazing, because it's something that I grew up doing. But they were like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. And when we came out, all these other 4x4 trucks were lined up on that berm where they had parked because the cars couldn't do it. And they thought that was so cool, and it's a way to just get them involved in a vehicle. Now, if you just hate Jeeps and 4x4s and that kind of thing, I have some other suggestions, but for the overall family experience, it's really hard to beat some sort of a camping or overland sort of deal. My second one would be some sort of a street machine / racing vehicle. In other words, like a Camaro or something that you drive primarily on the street, so they can ride down the street with you, and then you may want to take to the track once in a while on open track nights, or take to an SCCA event and go around some cones. Just something where they can enjoy the competition factor, but they also can ride around in it. Don't make the mistake of making them your personal laborers. In other words, nobody wants to be out there polishing Dad's car all the time. They want to ride in it. And, you get your wife or your family or, out in the car, and you pull up beside a stoplight with your car and you rev the throttle and you take off and throw them back in the seat and do all that stuff. They will love that. They will not be able to wait until the next time they get to ride in that car. Or an old pickup, just anything. My grandfather had an old pickup. We just loved riding in that thing because there was no seat belts. And Grandpa would throw us around, try to throw us against the passenger door, which I don't really recommend, because if the door would have come open, we would have all rolled out of the truck. But it was just, something where we were all enjoying it, and it wasn't too dangerous. Another thing to think about is maybe some motorcycles. The motorcycle culture has a great family feel to it. The only drawback to a motorcycle culture is that everybody needs to ride one or ride with somebody. Or you need to look into sidecars and that kind of thing, and not everybody likes to do that. But that's another option if that's something that you like. Keith, I hope this works for you. I hope this helps you out. Good luck to you. And we hope to see you out on the road with your family. All right, I've got a question for you guys. What is the most important tool in your garage? All right, I know you're thinking. Come on. All right. All right, well, it's probably the one you use the most. And that would be your sockets, your ratchets, your screwdrivers, and your wrenches. And if you want quality tools there, you probably ought to check out somebody like Cornwell. Now, granted, you can get some cheaper tools. And honestly, there's a place for those ones that you want to bend up and heat and go into certain places, and those screwdrivers you don't mind screwing up. Well, that's where you get the cheap stuff. But if you want real quality tools that are going to last and have a warranty, that's where you need to check out somebody like Cornwell. They've been doing it forever, and believe me, you do get what you pay for. All right, this next question comes from Kurt. And Kurt says, my grandpa has an old 73 Corvette. Old 73 Corvette? Thanks a lot, Kurt. I remember when those were driving around, man. Anyway, he says, I got an old 73 Corvette, and his grandpa has, and he wants me to have it. But I would feel guilty about selling it outright or to another family member. Any advice? Oh boy, that is a slippery slope right there. And this happens a lot, so I'm really glad you sent that question in. Basically, this is one of those situations where a family member or a grandparent or somebody wants to give you a car or will it to you or whatever. And it sounds like Kurt's a car guy and already has projects, so he doesn't want it. So, but he feels guilty, selling it or selling it to another family member because it's been given to him. Kurt, I'll tell you what, here's what the problem is with these kind of situations. There is an ugly animal out there called greed. It jumps on people's backs so quickly that you can't imagine. Greed and envy, they run together. And I'll tell you what, in these kind of situations, people start looking at Grandpa's Corvette or whatever, and they start to get really funny about that. And they don't want you to have it if they can't have it. And if you get it, they think you should share it with them, especially if you do a bunch of work to it and you get some money out of it. People get weird about this kind of stuff. So what is the solution? Well, first of all, the best way is you just got to be really honest with your grandmother or your grandfather if he's still living. You don't say if he's still around, but you just got to be really honest with them. And just say, listen, I love that you want to give me the car. I don't really want it. If you give it to me, will you have a problem if I sell it? That's the best way. You got to hit this thing head on, man. That way you don't get caught in a situation where somebody has expectations. And let me tell you how this happens. I've seen this happen thousands of times. And this can get really ugly. I mean, this can break families up. This can destroy friendships, lifelong friendships, where people get greedy and think that they deserve something and, you got the Corvette and they should have, and that kind of deal. If somebody comes to you, let's say grandma comes to you and she says, I want you to have this Corvette, but just promise me that you won't sell it. And what do? And most people in that situation will go, yeah, grandma, yeah, of course I won't sell it. That's the last thing you're thinking about is selling it. Okay, so now you have the car. Life changes. You don't have time to restore it. You're sending kids to college. Somebody, passes away. You go to school. You get sick, whatever. And now you can't sell the car because you promised grandma. Now, she may still be alive. She may not be. But basically what has happened is that you've made a vow, and you made a vow that you really can't keep and you shouldn't have made, but you did it out of just respect for her or whatever. So what you have to do is be honest and go back and fix this. And what usually happens is that in those kind of situations, especially if somebody's passed away or it's a family heirloom in somebody's eyes, that's their way of holding on to that person that's passed away or that memory. And you can't blame them for that, but it's not really fair for them to ask you, hey, don't ever sell this. Because if you agree to that, you don't really own it. Grandma still owns it, or Grandpa still owns it. And if you're okay with that, that's all right. But listen, I'm telling you, that can really bite you in the hind end. So you're smart to ask this question now. So the best way to alleviate this problem is to be real up forward with it right now and say, listen, here's the deal. If you're going to give it to me, it's mine. And I have the right to do whatever I want with it, and tell me you won't be angry. And, I'll try to restore it. I'll try to keep whatever. And if you have gotten yourself in trouble by making a promise like that, you got to go back and fix it. You got to go back and say, listen, I know I told you this. I don't want the car. I'm getting ready to sell it. If that's a problem, I'll just give it back to you. And do that kind of thing. So this shouldn't be a problem. Where you run into trouble is when you get that family member that is in it for greed. If somebody's been watching Barrett-Jackson and they think that car is very valuable and greed sets in, I will tell you, you need to get away from that. There is no car worth that. I don't care what it is. It never ends well. People get sued. These kind of things turn into Hatfield-McCoy type deals where generations of families hate each other because something that their grandparents did. Be careful with this. Make sure that anytime, somebody wants to give you a car or wants to do something and it comes with any kind of stipulation. You can't sell it, or you have to do it this way. Listen, I have seen guys do this, and they'll go, listen, I want you to take this car. I want you to finish it for me because I can't, but just promise me one thing, you'll paint it black. Man, don't agree to something unless you plan on painting it black. But even then, I wouldn't agree to that because, man, things change. You may want to do it black today, and then you might get down the road a couple years and go, I don't want a black car. I'm going to do this thing white or whatever. And you have to have the freedom. If it's your car, if it's your project, you got to have the freedom to do with it what you want. So keep that in mind. Good luck to you on the car. The 73 Vet is a cool car. I'd love to have one. Actually, 72 is the last of the chrome bumpers. So that's what I'd rather have, the 68 through 72. But I wouldn't pass up a 73 as long as it didn't come with stipulations. So be careful. Good luck to you, Kurt. All right, this next question comes from Justin. Justin has a very simple question here. He says, what's a good first project? All right. That's not a hard question to answer at all. Justin, I'll tell you what, the biggest thing that you have to consider is what your skill level is. You say it's a first project. I mean, is this the first thing you've ever worked on? Is this the first thing you're looking for a family member? Maybe for your kids? Do you have any tools? Do you have any space? There's a lot of other things to consider here, but let's say you've got all that kind of stuff figured out and you're kind of looking for a first project. I always suggest I don't know if you've seen the 5 levels of restoration that we've covered before, but level 1 is get it running and driving. And that would be the first style of project I would suggest. Get something that the main focus is mechanical. And this would be like a go-kart or a motorcycle or a quad or an old tractor. Something where your main focus is just going to be mechanical. Fuel, air, spark, and basic things, just so you can get something running and enjoy it and hear the motor run or have it move, however you're powering it, whatever you're doing. That is a great way to get into it, because the big mistake that a lot of people make is they just get an old car. Well, a car is a whole bunch of systems. It's not just mechanical. It's interior, it's upholstery, it's weather stripping, it's wiring, it's fuel systems. There's a lot going on there. And you'll get overwhelmed real quick if you're, not ready for that. Now, there is a school of thought. There's some people that are like, well, I learn by taking things apart. And there is absolute truth to that. So if you are that sort of person, just make sure you get something that you're going to be able to take your time with. So if you get frustrated or you get into something that you don't understand, which you will, that you can then set it aside, learn what you need to do, and then get back to it. And as long as you don't get in a hurry and get frustrated, that can work for you as well. But there's less people that work that way than just taking it a little bit at a time, because anytime you have to look at a project the proper way, there's goals as you're putting something together, and you need to hit those goals to keep yourself motivated. If you just keep piling on more things to do and never get anything done, pretty soon you'll be like, I don't want to go out in the garage. I don't even want to look at the door. And you just end up selling it, and you don't want to do that. So I would suggest get something, that's just fun, a quad, a side-by-side, a go-kart, a snowmobile, something, that might not be running, a boat, if that's what you're into. Just something where you can get it running and you can run it around the yard, and then you can step up and go, okay, I've kind of got that figured out. I know how propulsion systems work and engines and that kind of thing. Now I'll move on to something where I have to deal a little bit with an interior or windows or a top. And I say, definitely stay away from convertibles until you've been through some of the other levels, because those are a whole different animal, man. I remember the first convertible top I did. Woo! But, that was a way to learn. So good luck to you, Justin. Get yourself something and just start working on it, and hopefully it'll have a good ending for you. All right, that's it for today. Once again, we're brought to you by Cornwell Tools. Have a great day and get out there and work on something.